There's a strange truth about the world. Some people speak endlessly, but their words carry no weight. You've seen it, maybe you've felt it. Rooms filled with noise, voices layered on top of each other, everyone rushing to speak first, to sound clever, to be heard. But no one's really listening because most of what's being said isn't anchored in thought. It's just noise filling the silence people are too uncomfortable to sit with. Then there are those rare individuals who speak very little. They don't chase attention. They don't interrupt. They don't need to be the loudest person in the room. But when they do speak, everything stops. People turn. They listen. Not out of obligation, but out of respect. These are the people who understand something most never will, that words mean more when they come from a mind trained to stay still, a heart disciplined to remain calm, and a voice that only speaks when it must. In a time where expression is constant, where opinions are currency and silence is mistaken for weakness, the ability to hold back, to think clearly, and to choose words deliberately has become rare. And like anything rare, it's powerful, but that power doesn't come from talent or charisma, it comes from control. You see, silence isn't emptiness, it's not avoidance, it's not fear. When used with intention, silence becomes a tool, a weapon, a shield. It creates space for thought, for understanding, for truth. The people who master silence aren't avoiding the world, they're observing it. And when they speak from depth, from clarity, from a place the noisy ones haven't even touched. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, they all understood this. They weren't just philosophers writing in scrolls for future generations. They were leaders, soldiers, survivors. Men who knew that the greatest strength isn't the ability to speak, but the wisdom to know when not to. Their words were born from struggle, sharpened by restraint, and delivered with care. And that's what this conversation is about, not silence for silence's sake, not pretending to be wise by saying less, but learning how to develop the kind of mind that doesn't need to prove itself with noise. We're going to break down 10 lessons from Stoic philosophy that will show you how to train your thoughts, speak with purpose, and earn a respect that doesn't have to be asked for. These lessons aren't just ancient ideas, they're tools, mental disciplines you can apply today in how you listen, how you carry yourself, how you respond or don't. And if you learn to use them, you won't need to raise your voice to be heard, because real presence doesn't come from volume, it comes from control. And control starts with knowing yourself. So if you're ready, we'll begin with the foundation of everything, the mind. Because until you master what happens inside, nothing you say on the outside will ever hold weight. Let's get into it. Lesson 1. Master your mind before you open your mouth. Before any word leaves your mouth, before any reaction escapes your body, there's one battle that has already begun, internally. And that's where every outcome in life is decided. Not in the conversation, not in the argument, not in the moment you're being tested, but in the space between stimulus and response. The space where your thoughts form, where your emotions rise, and where your discipline is either present or absent. That space is where a person reveals who they really are. Most people live as slaves to their own thoughts. One comment sets them off, one disagreement, and they're spiraling. Someone disrespects them, and before they even process what happened, they're already reacting. Loudly, emotionally, carelessly. They think they're standing up for themselves, but they're actually giving their power away every single time. The Stoics knew this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire under constant threat, wars, betrayal, sickness, death, could have been justified in lashing out, in reacting to the chaos around him, but he didn't. Instead, he wrote to himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He wasn't writing for others. He wasn't performing. He was reminding himself that peace is not given, it's built. And it's built by the one who governs his own mind. That's where real power begins. You can't control other people. You can't control how life unfolds. But you can control how you interpret what happens, how you hold yourself in difficult moments, how you discipline your reactions. And if you don't develop that kind of internal control, it doesn't matter how good your intentions are. Your words will come out wrong. Your actions will betray your values, and you'll spend more time apologizing for your reactions than standing by your principles. This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. Stoicism isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's being able to feel anger without being controlled by it, to feel fear and still move with purpose, to feel insulted and still choose silence when silence holds more weight than any defense. So how do you train your mind? It begins with awareness, watching your thoughts as they arise and refusing to act on them blindly. Ask yourself in moments of tension, is this thought true? Is this reaction necessary? Am I seeing clearly or just emotionally? Marcus Aurelius did this through journaling, writing to himself, not to be admired, but to stay anchored. When the weight of the empire grew heavy, he reminded himself, the things you think about determine the quality of your mind. He knew the mind is like a sword, sharp when trained, dangerous when left unchecked. Today you can do the same. Instead of reacting to everything, observe your own thinking. Practice mindfulness, not as a trend, but as a discipline. Learn to pause, to step back, to see the moment for what it is, and respond, not as a prisoner of your emotions, but as a master of them. Because if you don't rule your mind, something else will. And once you've mastered what's happening inside, you'll be shocked at how little you need to say to be understood, and how much respect silence can earn when it's backed by clarity. This is where control begins, not with volume, not with force, but with mastery of the one thing no one else can touch, your mind. Lesson 2. Silence is louder than noise. Walk into any crowded room and you'll find the same thing. People talking over each other, trying to impress, trying to be heard, trying to win. You'll hear opinions offered like facts, arguments sparked by pride, and explanations no one really asked for. But somewhere in that room, there's someone who hasn't said a word, someone who listens, who watches, who waits. And when that person finally speaks, the room goes quiet. That's not coincidence. That's presence. You don't earn that kind of presence by being loud. You don't earn it by knowing everything or by proving people wrong. You earn it by having the discipline to say less and the strength to let your silence speak for you. Most people think that the more you say, the more intelligent you sound. But wisdom isn't measured by how much you speak. It's measured by how well you observe, how deeply you listen, and how intentionally you respond. A person who's always talking never learns, but the one who watches before speaking can see through anything. Silence, when used with purpose, is a form of dominance. It creates pressure. It draws attention. It shows that you're not rattled, that you're not performing, that you don't need validation to feel secure. And that makes people pay attention. Socrates knew this. One of the wisest men in history wasn't known for preaching. He was known for asking questions, for listening carefully, for responding slowly and with precision. His restraint wasn't hesitation, it was depth, it was confidence, and it's part of what made his influence so lasting, because when you speak less, your words gain weight. When you wait before responding, people lean in. When you don't rush to fill silence, people start to respect the fact that you're not like the rest. You're not desperate to be heard. You're not playing the same game. But silence isn't just about respect. It's about clarity. When you're silent, you're watching. You're reading the room. You're paying attention to the things most people miss, the tone, the energy, the unspoken intentions. You're listening not just to the words, but to the gaps between them. And that's where real understanding happens. The Stoics understood this perfectly. They believed that to live well, you must learn to listen well. Epictetus said, "Nature gave us one tongue and two ears so we could hear twice as much as we speak." Most people have flipped that ratio. But you don't have to be most people. If you want to cultivate silence as strength, start with this. When you're in conversation, stop thinking about what you're going to say next. Stop rehearsing your reply while the other person is still speaking. Instead, listen fully. Let there be pauses. Let there be space. You don't need to rush. You don't need to impress. Just listen. And when it's time to speak, say only what matters. Say it with calm. Say it with clarity. Then let your silence finish the sentence. In a world full of noise, silence is rare. And anything rare becomes powerful if you know how to use it. Lesson 3, observe more, react less. In any moment of tension, you'll notice two types of people. The first reacts immediately, emotionally, without thinking. They raise their voice, jump to defend themselves, rush to prove a point or fight for control. The second says nothing, not because they're weak, but because they're watching. And the one who watches always wins. You don't gain insight by reacting, you gain it by observing, by letting the situation reveal itself before you step into it. A person who reacts too fast is a slave to impulse. But the one who observes first is the one who understands, not just what's happening, but why it's happening. That's the skill most people never develop, observation, the ability to see without interference, to watch people without judgment, to let the moment unfold while you remain centered. Because when you observe instead of react, you learn the truth about people. You see what drives them, what bothers them, what they're really saying beneath the surface. And while everyone else is tangled up in noise and emotion, you're still. You're seeing clearly, and that makes you powerful in ways that don't need to be shown. The Stoics were masters of this. They believed in stepping back, not from responsibility, but from emotional blindness. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly, "If you are troubled by something, it is not the thing itself, but your judgment of it. And judgment is always clouded when you react before you see." Even in modern life, the power of observation holds true. Think of Warren Buffett, not a warrior or philosopher, but a master observer. He doesn't rush into decisions. He doesn't follow noise. He waits. He watches. He studies behavior of markets, of people, of patterns. And because of that, he acts from clarity, not emotion. That's not passivity. That's precision. This skill isn't just for leaders or thinkers. It's for every moment of your life. When someone insults you, observe their intention. When someone challenges you, observe their fear. When a situation gets heated, observe what's really at stake, and then decide intelligently what's worth your energy and what deserves only your silence. To develop this skill, you don't need a special technique. You need practice. Practice slowing down your reactions. Practice staying quiet for a few extra seconds. Let others speak first. Let the moment breathe. Then decide calmly, consciously, clearly what your response should be. The one who reacts is being pulled by the current. The one who observes, he's standing on the shore, deciding when and if it's worth stepping in. When you train yourself to observe before you act, you take control of your presence. People won't just hear your words, they'll feel the weight behind them. Because they'll know this is someone who doesn't speak until they understand, and never moves without purpose. That's what separates the reckless from the wise, and that's how you begin to hold power. Quietly. Lesson 4. Patience is a weapon few can hold. Patience is one of those words people throw around without understanding its true power. It's often mistaken for passivity, for doing nothing. But real patience, the kind practiced by the Stoics and by the strongest individuals in history, is not the absence of action. It's the presence of control. Patience is restraint when you have the strength to strike. It's the discipline to wait, not because you're afraid, but because you're aware. You know, timing changes everything. The world we live in doesn't reward patience on the surface. It praises speed, noise, reaction. Everything is immediate. Opinions, responses, judgment. If someone says something you don't like, you're expected to respond instantly. If you're challenged, you're expected to fight back. But those who rise above that instinct, those who can sit with discomfort, remain still in the face of pressure and act only when the moment demands it. Those are the ones who gain real authority. Take Epictetus, a man born into slavery, a man who had every reason to be bitter, angry, reactive, and yet he wasn't. Even when his leg was twisted until it broke, he didn't scream, didn't curse. He simply said, "There, now it's broken." That wasn't numbness, that was composure, that was patience, hardened by experience. He didn't let pain define his response. He remained unmoved, not because he lacked feeling, but because he had trained himself to hold his ground even when everything around him fell apart. Patience is not inaction, it's strategic silence, it's delayed response. It's observing the whole board before moving a single piece, and those who master it become unpredictable, not because they're erratic, but because they're unreadable. You never know what a patient man is thinking. You never know when he'll speak. And so when he does, everyone listens. We often hear the phrase, "strike while the iron is hot." But the Stoic would ask, what if the iron isn't ready? What if acting now costs more than waiting? What if silence today means impact tomorrow? Here's the truth. Anyone can respond instantly, but very few can wait, and fewer still can wait while holding their presence, calm, undisturbed, unshaken. To develop this kind of patience, start with this. Learn to sit with discomfort. When you feel the urge to react, pause. Don't push it away, but don't act on it either. Watch it rise. Watch it settle. Learn to understand the difference between what is urgent and what is important, and know this: very few things are both. In arguments, hold your ground. In negotiations, let silence do the heavy lifting. In life, let people rush past you while you walk with intention. You don't need to speak every time you're challenged. You don't need to explain yourself at every turn. The man who can wait, who can breathe through pressure and speak only when ready, will always be stronger than the one who panics at the first sign of discomfort. Patience is not weakness, it is armor. It is power that doesn't need to be shown. It is quiet control in a world obsessed with reaction. And those who carry it walk through chaos, untouched. Lesson 5. Silence builds mystery and influence. There's a reason why the quietest person in the room often becomes the most intriguing. It's not because they're trying to impress anyone. It's not because they're playing a game. It's because their silence creates space, and in that space, people begin to wonder about their thoughts, about their strength, about the way they see the world, and that curiosity turns into influence. You don't have to speak loudly to be respected. You don't even have to speak often. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all and let people feel your presence without a single word. That kind of presence is not given. It's earned, and it's built through consistency, restraint, and self-control. When you speak constantly, people stop listening, but when you speak rarely and with purpose, people hang on every word. Why? Because you've trained them to expect that when you speak, it means something. Your silence has already built the weight of your voice, and that weight can move more than volume ever could. Consider someone like Keanu Reeves. He doesn't need to dominate interviews or push his way into headlines. He stays quiet. He moves with intention. He listens more than he speaks. And when he does speak, it's simple, but it carries. Not because of what he says, but because of how he holds himself when he says it. That's not an accident, that's discipline. The Stoics understood this. Seneca once wrote, "Silence is a lesson learned through life's many sufferings." That's not just poetic, it's practical. Those who've lived through pain, through loss, through real hardship often come out quieter, not because they have nothing to say, but because they've learned the difference between what's worth saying and what's better left unsaid. In silence, you keep your energy, you keep your strategy, you keep your composure. You don't give away your thoughts for free. You let people guess, observe, try to figure you out. And in that process, they start to respect the boundaries you haven't even voiced. To cultivate this kind of influence, don't just stay silent for the sake of it. Stay silent to sharpen your awareness, to study people, to observe what others miss while they're too busy talking. And when the time comes to speak, do it calmly, clearly, and briefly. Let your presence say more than your words ever could. And don't mistake mystery for manipulation. This isn't about pretending to be wise. It's about genuinely building depth within yourself, so you don't need to advertise it. You don't need to overshare. You don't need to compete for attention. You become the one who doesn't chase the room, but still holds it when you choose to speak. Because silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of strength. Lesson 6. Calmness commands respect. There's a kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't come with volume or speed or intensity. It comes with stillness, with restraint, with composure. And when someone walks into a room carrying that kind of calm, everything changes. People stop to notice, not because the person demands attention, but because they don't. In a world addicted to reaction, someone who remains calm becomes magnetic. They stand out, not for what they do, but for what they don't. They don't rush. They don't explode. They don't get dragged into every emotional current. And that control makes people trust them, follow them, and listen when they speak. Calmness is often mistaken for passivity, but make no mistake, it's the sign of someone in complete command of themselves. Because it's easy to lose your temper. It's easy to raise your voice. Anyone can do that. But the man who stays still while others panic, that man holds power others can feel, even if they don't understand it. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who led during war, plague, and betrayal, wrote in Meditations, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." He wasn't just offering comfort, he was giving you a key. The moment you realize that nothing external can disturb you unless you allow it to, you begin to move through the world differently. Look at leaders like Barack Obama. Agree or disagree with his politics, but notice the way he communicates. Under fire, he didn't rush to defend. Under pressure, he didn't raise his voice. He paused. He breathed. He chose his words slowly, and that deliberate calm turned into trust, influence, and authority. So how do you cultivate calm? Start by rejecting the idea that every challenge deserves a reaction. You don't have to defend yourself against every comment. You don't have to match someone's energy when they come at you with negativity. Let them burn out while you remain grounded. Let them wonder why they can't shake you. Practice controlled breathing when you feel tension rising. Slow down your response time. Watch your tone. Don't let your emotions lead your body. Lead them instead. And understand this. You don't have to respond in the moment to be in control. Sometimes the strongest move is to say nothing at all until you've decided how to respond with clarity, not chaos. When you stay calm, you do more than protect your own peace. You teach others how to engage with you. You show them that if they want to interact, they'll have to do it on your terms. And those terms are steady, disciplined, and mature. Calmness doesn't mean you're unaffected. It means you are focused. It means you choose to respond only when it matters. And when it matters, you'll be ready. That's why the calm man is respected, not because he demands it, but because he makes people feel that beneath his silence, there's something deeper they can't quite touch. And that mystery, that depth, is more powerful than anything they've heard all day. Lesson 7. Use silence to avoid useless conflict. There's a point in life where you realize not every fight is worth it. Not every challenge needs to be answered. Not every insult deserves a reply. And if you haven't reached that point yet, it means you're still handing out your energy to people and situations that don't deserve it. One of the greatest advantages of silence is that it keeps you out of conflicts that only exist to drain you. Think about how much time is wasted arguing with people who don't want truth. They want control. They don't want clarity. They want attention, and every time you bite the bait, you give them both. But silence is different. Silence says, I'm not here to play that game. Silence removes your presence from the trap. And when you don't react, you remove their power. Stoic wisdom makes this clear. Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." That same idea applies to conflict. It's not the situation that robs your peace. It's the craving to be right, to win, to prove something. Let that go, and the fire dies without you. You see it everywhere. Online debates that spiral into hate. Conversations that turn into personal attacks, meetings where people talk over each other just to be right. You can step into that chaos, or you can stay quiet and watch the storm burn itself out. There's strength in not needing to be right, not needing the last word, not needing to explain yourself to people who aren't listening anyway. Imagine this: you're in a conversation and someone takes a shot at you, subtle or direct. You feel the reaction rise in your chest, that pull to defend, to snap back, to correct. But instead, you look at them, you nod, and you say nothing. Not because you're scared, but because you've already decided they don't get your peace. They don't earn your energy. And watch what happens next. That silence, it unsettles them. They expected your anger. They were prepared for your words, but they weren't ready for your composure. Because silence removes their leverage. It exposes their insecurity. It makes them face their own noise without anything to push against. Of course, there are moments where speaking up matters. We'll get to that. But most conflict in daily life, it's not about principle. It's about ego. And the wisest man in the room is often the one who leaves his ego out of it. And so the next time you're pulled into drama, ask yourself, what do I lose by staying silent? If the answer is nothing, you already know what to do. Let others burn their energy, proving a point. Let others fight for the spotlight. You don't need it. You have something more valuable: control. And silence, when used with clarity, isn't surrender. It's elevation. It's the decision to protect your energy, and that decision will separate you from almost everyone. Lesson 8. Silence makes you a better leader. Leadership is not about filling rooms with words. It's not about having the loudest voice, the quickest answer, or the sharpest retort. True leadership isn't loud. It's composed, measured, intentional. And at the heart of that is silence. People often associate leadership with charisma, speech-making, and visibility. But the best leaders Those who move people, earn loyalty, and create long-lasting impact lead first by listening. They don't speak to prove their intelligence. They listen to understand. They observe to learn. And when they do speak, it's with clarity that makes every word land like a decision. Think of leaders like Tim Cook. He stepped into one of the most high-pressure leadership roles on earth, succeeding a legend like Steve Jobs. But Cook didn't try to mimic Jobs's forceful presence. He led with a different style: quiet confidence, active listening, minimal words. In meetings, he often says little while others speak. He listens, absorbs, weighs, and when he responds, people know he means what he says. That's not silence born of uncertainty. It's silence rooted in self-trust. Silence in leadership sends a message: I don't need to dominate the room. I am the room. It creates space for others to rise. It invites collaboration without chaos. And most of all, it signals maturity. Because a leader who doesn't rush to speak isn't threatened by the noise around him. Stoic leadership was built on this very principle. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire, but still questioned himself every day. He led armies, balanced politics, faced betrayal, and still chose silence when speaking wouldn't serve truth. His authority didn't come from speeches, it came from control. From how little he allowed outside circumstances to shake his presence. So, how does silence translate into leadership? It gives you the power to listen, not just hear. It sharpens your ability to detect what others miss. The insecurity behind confidence, the hesitation behind bold words, the silence behind what isn't being said. It makes you wise before you act, and that wisdom is what people will trust. But don't confuse silence with inaction. Great leaders also know when to speak, when to give direction, when to say the thing no one else will. The difference is they don't speak from impulse. They speak from certainty. And if you want to lead well, start by mastering your silence. Let others fill the air while you gather insight. Let others try to impress while you build depth. You don't need to talk over people to guide them. You don't need to broadcast strength to possess it. People will follow the one who sees clearly, the one who speaks calmly, the one who doesn't need noise to be heard. That kind of leadership doesn't come from authority. It comes from control. And that control begins in silence. Lesson 9. Use silence to develop yourself. Most people run from silence. They fill every quiet moment with distraction, scrolling, talking, watching, reacting. They don't realize that in doing so, they're running from the very thing that could change their life, the space where growth begins. Silence isn't empty. It's not wasted time. It's not the absence of productivity. It's where you start to hear yourself again, your real self. The thoughts that don't scream for attention, the questions you've avoided, the truths you've buried under noise. That's why silence is sacred. It reveals what's real. In a world that glorifies being busy, silence feels uncomfortable. But it's in that discomfort that transformation happens. When the world quiets down, your internal world starts to speak. And if you have the courage to listen, you'll find clarity you've been chasing for years. Take Bill Gates, one of the most influential minds of our time. Twice a year, he disappears into what he calls Think Week. No meetings, no media, just him, books, and silence. In that space, he reads, he reflects, he evaluates, and the insights he gains in those days shape billion-dollar decisions. Not because he did more, but because he slowed down enough to think. You don't need a cabin in the woods or a 7-day retreat. You just need moments. Moments where you step back from noise, where you sit in your room without your phone, where you take a walk without music, where you simply exist with your thoughts, your questions, your unfinished conversations with yourself. This is where inner strength is built, not in front of a crowd, not while proving yourself, but in the stillness where you begin to realign. You realize what matters. You see where you've been lying to yourself. You remember goals you've pushed aside, and you begin, not with fanfare, but with quiet decision. Silence is also where mastery is forged. Writers, leaders, artists, philosophers, they all spend time alone. Not because they're antisocial, but because silence gives birth to focus, and focus is where excellence lives. The Stoics practiced this constantly. They journaled not to impress, but to examine their own minds. Marcus Aurelius didn't write meditations for an audience, he wrote it to strengthen himself. In silence, he faced his fears, corrected his thoughts, and refined his vision. You can do the same. So if you want to grow, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, start making space for silence. Schedule it like a meeting, protect it like a ritual, and use it not just to rest, but to reflect. Ask yourself better questions. Write down what you're afraid to say out loud. Think deeply, not about what others expect of you, but about who you actually are when no one's watching. You won't hear your deepest truth in a crowded room. You'll hear it in the quiet when the noise stops and you finally have to face yourself. That's where strength is born, not from talking more, but from thinking better. Lesson 10. Know when to speak. Silence is a powerful discipline, but knowing when to break it is what separates the quiet from the wise. You can master your mind. You can control your emotions. You can stay calm in the storm. But if you never speak when it matters, you haven't learned silence. You've only learned avoidance. Stoicism doesn't teach us to stay silent forever. It teaches us to choose our words with care, to wait for the right moment, and then to speak with clarity and purpose. Because words, when timed with precision, carry more force than 1,000 shouted arguments. There will be moments in your life, personal, professional, moral, where your voice is not just useful, but necessary. Moments when remaining silent is not strength, but complicity. And in those moments, you must speak, but not from impulse, from principle, from understanding. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. He didn't speak often, but when he did, the world moved. His words were not long-winded, not self-serving. They were anchored in truth and courage. His "I have a dream" speech didn't change history because of its length. It changed history because it was delivered at the precise moment when silence would have been surrender. That's the art of knowing when to speak, not to prove a point, not to feed your ego, but to serve something bigger, to defend what's right, to draw a line when it matters, and to leave an impact that silence alone can't deliver. But most people get it backwards. They speak when they should wait. They react when they should observe. And then, when the moment truly calls for them to speak, they have nothing left, because they've spent their voice on noise. This is why timing is everything. In conversation, say less until the moment your words can shape the room. In conflict, hold your fire until the truth needs to be spoken. In leadership, stay still until your voice can cut through confusion and provide direction. Train yourself to feel the moment. Ask, is this about my pride or my principles? Will this help or just make noise? Am I speaking to lead or to be heard? The Stoic way is not silence or speech, it's discernment. It's learning to use both like tools. And like any good tool, they're most effective when used with care, not constantly. So speak, but speak when it matters. Speak when silence would betray you. Speak when the truth has waited long enough. And when you do, don't raise your voice, raise your meaning. Because one sentence spoken at the right moment can carry more force than a lifetime of chatter. Closing reflection: speak less, lead more, live wiser. So here we are, 10 lessons, drawn from ancient minds and forged in the fires of experience. Lessons not about talking, but about understanding. about reclaiming the space between impulse and action, about choosing to live in a world full of noise without becoming part of it. You've seen it now. The loudest person in the room isn't always the strongest. The quickest to react is rarely the one in control. And the ones who truly lead, the ones who command respect without demanding it, are the ones who've trained their minds, mastered their emotions, and learned the quiet force of discipline. That's what silence really is. It's not emptiness, it's presence. Every time you choose not to respond to nonsense, you gain power. Every time you listen instead of interrupt, you learn something others miss. And every time you pause before you speak, you sharpen your words until they land with weight. This isn't theory, it's a way of living. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone. You don't need to enter every argument. You don't need to prove your worth through noise. You prove it through clarity, through calm, through the way you hold yourself, even when everything around you pulls at your patience. The Stoics didn't teach silence because they were afraid to speak. They taught it because they understood this. When you know yourself deeply, you don't have to speak constantly. And when you do speak, it comes from truth, not insecurity. So ask yourself, have you been speaking just to be heard, or have you been waiting to speak when it matters? Have you been reacting to life or observing it with discipline? Have you been trying to look strong or building strength quietly within? Because this isn't about sounding stoic, it's about becoming one. And if you've made it this far, you're not just someone chasing wisdom, you're practicing it, silently, steadily, day by day. So here's your challenge. In the next conversation you have, pause. In the next disagreement, listen before you speak. In the next moment of chaos, stay still, breathe and wait. And when you finally do speak, let it be something that matters. If you're ready to walk this path, to lead with silence, to speak with purpose, and to live with control, drop a comment below that says, "I choose clarity over noise." Let it be your signal. To yourself, to the community, to anyone else who's learning that the less you say, the more they'll feel it. Because when the world is loud, silence becomes revolutionary. And now that you know how to use it, you don't need to talk about your strength. You just need to live it.